welcome back to my channel. I am Noelle. If you are new here, I am a photographer, a content creator, and I recently moved to Chicago, and that's what today's video is going to be about. How I found my apartment in Chicago. I've been sharing an apartment decorating series on my Instagram and TikTok, and people are asking me how I found my apartment, and so I'm going to go over the steps that I took to find the apartment without living in Chicago. So I recently moved to Chicago, so I had to find an apartment without knowing too much about Chicago, but with this journey I did figure out a lot, and I think I have a few tips for you guys. If you're planning to move to Chicago, whether you are from out of state or you're just moving buildings in Chicago, my biggest recommendation is to use a broker. It is free in Chicago, and it's an Illinois law, but it's free in Chicago to use brokers. Free to you. You don't have to pay a broker's fee. So there's no reason not to use a broker. Now I will say there are helpful brokers and there are not so helpful brokers. So you gotta make sure that you find a good one. If you are looking for a recommendation, I have the one that I used and she was absolutely phenomenal and helped me find my apartment that I'm currently in. What my broker did for me, which it could vary broker to broker, but she set up an account through her company and it was basically like Tinder for apartments. I told her everything that I was looking for in an apartment, my budget, the locations I wanted to look in, the things that I wanted in my building, and she took all the information that I gave her and put it into a profile. Once she had my profile done, she found a ton of options. I think she came back to me with like 50 different options, and she had me just swipe left and right on them, literally like Tinder, say yes or no, and then leave notes for her, not to specifically look at those apartments, but to get an idea of what I liked and what I didn't like. She then took all of those notes and things that I said yes and no to and found me a few options to actually tour. Don't necessarily need to be in Chicago to tour these apartments. The broker that I used actually toured for me and she would just FaceTime me in. Obviously that's not ideal for everybody. I did want to be down here and actually tour them in person. I came down a time before and toured a bunch and then just decided I didn't like the area that I was looking in. So when I found this broker, she started touring them on FaceTime for me. She would FaceTime me in and give me her honest opinion. I was looking in an area that I had never been in before and she would FaceTime me and walk down the streets. She walked me like completely down the main road in the area that I'm in and showed me all the restaurants, the coffee shops and everything. She was going in them and showing me the food and stuff. She was absolutely phenomenal at her job. I love her, adore her. I'm definitely gonna use her again next time I'm moving, but she made this process so easy to find an apartment. So like I said, you don't necessarily need to be in Chicago to tour apartments, but you can be. So she will tour with you or she can FaceTime tour you in, but that's just her. All brokers are going to be a little bit different, but I would recommend using a broker because the amount of options that you have in Chicago for apartments is very, very overwhelming. I didn't even know where to begin with the areas. Once you find an area, there is hundreds of apartment options. There's big buildings, there's small individual buildings. You really just have to figure out what you want, and then using a broker will help you get to the exact apartment. So maybe just take that into consideration when you're looking for an apartment in Chicago. The number one thing that I looked for in an apartment is the location. Chicago has many neighborhoods, and every single one has completely different vibes. They have different people living there. They have access to different types of activities, different stores, everything like that. So doing your research on the area that you want to live in, I think, is extremely important. I am not going to specifically talk about the neighborhoods. I've been here for 2 weeks and I don't feel like I'm an expert on them by any means, and I know I will get people correcting me if I say anything. So maybe I'll make an updated video when I've been here for a little bit longer, but do your research on the neighborhoods that you're looking into. Now this goes hand in hand with the location, but once you find an apartment that you're going to tour, I want you to open up your maps, type in the address and see what is around. What does the public transportation look like? What are the grocery stores in that area? If you go to a gym, are there gyms accessible in that area? In my area, there is no big gyms. There's only smaller workout class type of gyms, not like an actual big gym. Being mindful of what is around you, what you use on a daily basis, is that going to be accessible to you in a walking distance. Another big difference I think in apartments when you're looking in Chicago is, do you want to be in a big apartment complex or would you rather have a smaller complex with maybe 1 or 2 to 4 units? Maybe you're working with more of an individualized landlord rather than a big apartment building. Another option that I didn't even know was going to be an option until I found this apartment that I'm currently in is you can rent condos from people, and my brother's in a similar situation. People who buy condos sometimes rent them out, so I'm in a big apartment complex, but it's a condo, so I have an individual landlord. Also, another thing that I didn't even know was going to be an option was to get a furnished apartment. So I moved I've been moving around a lot. When I moved out of Denver, I actually sold everything that I owned. I sold all my furniture, my bed, everything. So I had nothing. It would have cost me thousands of dollars to furnish an entire apartment by myself. And so to find a furnished apartment saved me a lot of time and money, especially moving in January. It's freaking cold out, and that would have been mover fees, delivery fees, all of the costs of the actual furniture. So finding a furnished apartment for me was a blessing that I wasn't even looking for. But something to keep in mind, you can still be in a big apartment complex and have a smaller individualized landlord. Another big thing is, do you want amenities or not? Majority of the time, the buildings with the larger amenities are going to have smaller apartments, or if you're going to have the same size apartment as a apartment with no amenities, the same size is going to be a lot more expensive. So just keeping that in mind, do you want amenities? Is that important to you? Or do you not want amenities? Do you want to get out? The advice that I was given was, you're new to the city, go to a building that doesn't have as many amenities so that you are forced to leave your building to do things. So if I want to go to the gym, I need to go get a gym membership. I kept that in mind while looking in my overall budget and everything, but that's also going to force me to get out of my house and to meet new people. So if you're new to the city or you're trying to make friends when you move to the city, maybe it's important for you to have less amenities, pay less for rent, and that's going to get you out of the house more, meeting new people. Use it as an excuse to leave the house. Mapping out the public transportation options, I also think, is a big thing that you should do. I did this when I was moving to multiple different cities, specifically London, Barcelona, but in Denver, I had my own car. I really would encourage you not to bring a car here. When I came down here to tour apartments the first time, I drove down here from Minnesota and I had my car, and it is so wildly inconvenient to drive a car here. And there's parking tickets up the wazoo. Parking is super expensive. It's hard to find parking, and like if you park overnight, it's going to cost you a lot of money unless you are paying for a parking spot in your apartment, also very expensive. The public transportation here is pretty good from what I have experienced so far. I would highly recommend looking into public transportation options rather than bringing your car. Speaking of that, the public transportation options, you can just get the app Ventra, and it will give you passes for the bus and the train lines. Those are all things that I really think you should take into consideration when you are looking for an apartment. My biggest recommendation obviously is still to use a broker. I think she made my life a million times easier. After I finish unpacking and finish decorating everything, I'm going to be doing a full apartment tour, but those are just a few tips that I learned from searching for apartments in Chicago. I have met some wonderful people here already, and people have been very welcoming and easy to make friends so far, so I'm very excited. But if you have any more questions about looking for an apartment in Chicago, or you need a recommendation for a broker, feel free to leave me a comment or message me on Instagram. I hope that was even a little bit helpful if you're looking to move to Chicago. I hope that your move and your apartment search goes smoothly. I will see you guys in my next video.